think I'm doing this like repotting thing.
Yeah.
You know, when you pull yourself up by the roots and you're kind of dangling and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? What's happening? But you know you're going to land kind of in fertile ground.
Yeah.
When Hoda Kotb looked into the camera and announced she was leaving the Today Show, millions of viewers expected tears. What they didn't expect was the wave of questions that followed. After nearly 3 decades at NBC, she calmly explained that turning 60 had made her realize it was time to begin a new chapter. It sounded heartfelt, sincere, and deeply personal. But almost overnight, that explanation wasn't enough for many people. Social media exploded with theories. Was she really walking away on her own? Had NBC quietly pushed one of its biggest stars aside? Or was there a story unfolding behind the scenes that viewers weren't being told? Every interview she gave seemed to answer one question while creating 2 more. The timing felt almost too perfect, and fans started digging for clues hidden beneath her emotional farewell. Before long, what looked like a simple retirement became one of television's biggest mysteries. And as more details emerged, the truth became far more complicated than anyone had imagined. But the rumors were only getting started. One rumor refused to disappear. According to multiple entertainment insiders, Hoda had become one of NBC's highest-paid personalities, with reports placing her annual salary at more than $20 million. At the same time, the television industry was changing faster than ever. Traditional morning shows were fighting shrinking audiences as viewers moved towards streaming platforms, podcasts, and social media. Advertising dollars weren't flowing like they once had, and networks everywhere were looking for ways to cut costs. Suddenly, people began wondering whether Hoda's departure was really about family or whether it was also about business. Some reports suggested executives were preparing a new contract that would have included a significant pay reduction. Nothing publicly confirmed there was a dispute, but the speculation spread quickly. After all, when one of television's most recognizable faces announces an unexpected exit during a period of financial pressure, people naturally start connecting the dots. Yet even that explanation left one important question unanswered. Because behind closed doors, something much more personal was already changing Hoda's life forever. Long before viewers knew anything was wrong, Hoda's world had already been turned upside down. In early 2023, she suddenly disappeared from Today for nearly 2 weeks without offering much explanation. Fans immediately noticed her absence, and concerns spread across social media. When she finally returned, the truth was heartbreaking. Her youngest daughter, Hope, had been hospitalized after doctors discovered a serious medical condition that required constant attention. Later, Hoda revealed Hope had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, a condition that transformed daily life inside their home. Every meal required planning. Nights became filled with blood sugar checks instead of uninterrupted sleep. Simple family routines suddenly revolved around insulin, monitoring devices, and the constant possibility of emergencies. Even someone as experienced at balancing pressure as Hoda admitted this was different. No television schedule, no matter how successful, could compete with the responsibility of caring for her little girl. For the first time in years, her demanding career no longer felt like the obvious priority. But to understand why this decision became so emotional, you have to go back to where Hoda's remarkable story first began. Before America came to know Hoda Kotb as the smiling face of morning television, she was simply a young girl trying to figure out where she belonged. Born in Oklahoma to Egyptian parents, her childhood looked nothing like the stable life many people imagine. Her father's engineering career carried the family across continents, taking them from the United States to Egypt and even Nigeria, before eventually settling in Virginia. Every move meant new schools, unfamiliar classmates, and another chance to start over. In one country, her name blended in perfectly. In another, teachers struggled just to pronounce it. Those constant changes taught her something that would later become her greatest strength: how to connect with complete strangers in almost any situation. She learned to read people quickly, adapt without complaining, and find confidence even when she felt like an outsider. Looking back, Those early experiences quietly prepared her for a career built on earning the trust of millions. But first, she had to survive a series of setbacks that would have convinced most people to quit forever. Graduating with a journalism degree should have felt like the beginning of a dream. Instead, it became one of the most discouraging chapters of Hoda's life. While many of her classmates accepted job offers, she found herself driving from station to station, carrying a tape she hoped would impress someone. Anyone. It didn't. One newsroom after another turned her away. Some rejected her politely. Others barely watched her audition before saying no. By the time she counted them all, she had heard the word no 27 different times. Most people would have accepted defeat, but Hoda refused to let strangers decide her future. Then, during one exhausting drive through Mississippi, she noticed a small local television station and decided to try one last time. That unexpected stop changed everything. A news director watched her entire tape, saw something others had missed, and offered her a job almost immediately. One opportunity erased months of rejection and opened the first door toward national television. Little did she know, the hardest part of her journey was still waiting ahead. Getting hired at a tiny television station in Mississippi felt like a victory. But the reality was far from glamorous. Hoda quickly discovered that local journalism demanded far more than reading headlines behind a desk. She was often her own reporter, writer, editor, and producer, all in the same day. Some mornings began before sunrise, while others stretched late into the night as breaking news refused to wait. She carried heavy camera equipment, rushed to accident scenes, wrote scripts under impossible deadlines, and somehow still managed to smile on air. There were no luxury dressing rooms or celebrity treatment, just long hours and constant pressure to improve. Every assignment became another lesson, every mistake another opportunity to grow. Instead of complaining about the workload, she embraced it, believing each broadcast moved her one step closer to the career she dreamed about. Looking back, those exhausting years gave her something far more valuable than fame. They built resilience. And that determination soon caught the attention of a much bigger audience. Because her next opportunity would place her in the middle of one of America's most unpredictable cities. When Hoda accepted a position in New Orleans, everything changed. Suddenly, she wasn't just reporting local stories, she was becoming a familiar face in thousands of homes every single night. Viewers came to rely on her calm voice during severe storms, hurricane warnings, and emergencies that kept entire communities on edge. While many people saw only the polished anchor sitting behind the desk, they never witnessed the endless hours spent gathering facts before each broadcast. She covered heartbreaking crimes, political controversies, natural disasters, and emotional human interest stories that demanded sensitivity as much as professionalism. Every report strengthened the bond between Hoda and her audience. Trust wasn't built overnight, it was earned through consistency, honesty, and showing up when people needed reliable information most. Her reputation continued growing, and before long, someone inside NBC noticed the young anchor making waves in Louisiana. That single moment of recognition would launch her onto the national stage. But national television came with risks she had never imagined. Joining NBC's Dateline wasn't simply a promotion, it was an entirely different world. Gone were the predictable local broadcasts. Instead, Hoda found herself traveling across the globe to cover some of the most dangerous and emotionally intense stories imaginable. One assignment even took her secretly into Myanmar, where she interviewed pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi while international tensions remained dangerously high. Every trip carried uncertainty. Every destination introduced new risks. Some days she stood inside disaster zones. Other times she interviewed people whose lives had been shattered by violence, war, or political conflict. The glamorous image of network television disappeared quickly once she experienced the emotional weight of telling stories that truly mattered. Behind every polished broadcast stood countless moments of fear, preparation, and responsibility. Those experiences transformed her from a talented reporter into one of NBC's most respected journalists. Yet no amount of professional success could prepare her for the emotional challenge waiting just around the corner. Because soon, she would return to a city she loved under the worst possible circumstances. Few assignments tested Hoda more than returning to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. The city where she had built her career had become almost unrecognizable. Streets, once filled with life, now stood underwater. Neighborhoods had vanished, and families searched desperately for loved ones. Reporting the disaster wasn't simply another job, it was deeply personal. She wasn't covering strangers, she was documenting the suffering of people she had once lived and worked beside. Day after day, she listened to heartbreaking stories of survival, loss, and unimaginable resilience. But Katrina wasn't the only tragedy weighing on her shoulders. Years of reporting from disaster zones, conflict areas, and heartbreaking interviews slowly took an emotional toll that viewers could never see. While she remained composed on camera, the constant exposure to grief quietly accumulated behind the scenes. It was becoming harder to separate work from emotion, and just as she thought life might finally slow down, fate delivered the most personal challenge she had ever faced. This time, she wasn't reporting someone else's crisis. It was her own. In 2007, what began as a routine medical appointment instantly became one of the most frightening days of Hoda's life. Doctors discovered breast cancer, shattering the image she had always held of herself as healthy and active. Suddenly, every conversation revolved around surgeries, treatment options, and uncertain outcomes. She faced difficult medical decisions while continuing to process the emotional shock of hearing a diagnosis no one ever expects. Instead of retreating from the public eye, Hoda made a decision that surprised almost everyone. She chose to share her journey openly, allowing viewers to witness not only her strength, but also her fear and vulnerability. Thousands of women later said her honesty inspired them to schedule screenings that may have saved their own lives. The experience transformed her perspective forever. After surviving something so deeply personal, the worries that once seemed overwhelming suddenly felt much smaller. But surviving cancer didn't just change how she viewed life. It completely reshaped the direction of her career, and the opportunity that followed would make her one of the most beloved faces on television. After years of reporting from disaster zones and interviewing people during the darkest moments of their lives, Hoda was offered something completely different. NBC invited her to help launch the fourth hour of Today, a lighter, more conversational program that focused on lifestyle, entertainment, and everyday stories. On paper, it seemed like an unusual fit. How could a hard-hitting journalist known for covering hurricanes and international conflicts suddenly become a daytime host? Even Hoda wasn't sure how viewers would respond. But almost immediately, something clicked. Instead of hiding behind the polished image expected of television anchors, she allowed her real personality to shine through. She laughed when moments were funny, became emotional when stories touched her heart, and never pretended to have all the answers. That honesty made audiences feel like they weren't watching a celebrity, they were spending the morning with a trusted friend. Ratings steadily climbed as viewers embraced the authenticity that couldn't be manufactured. Without realizing it, Hoda had found the role she was always meant to play, but the partnership that followed would completely redefine morning television. When Kathy Lee Gifford joined Hoda on the fourth hour of Today, few expected the pairing to become one of television's biggest success stories. Their personalities couldn't have been more different, yet that contrast became their greatest strength. Their conversations felt spontaneous instead of scripted, filled with genuine laughter, playful disagreements, and heartfelt moments that audiences rarely saw on live television. One unexpected segment involving fake wine glasses quickly turned into a signature feature after guests started asking where the drinks had gone. Before long, real wine appeared on the table, giving the show a relaxed atmosphere unlike anything else on morning television. Critics questioned the format, but viewers couldn't get enough of it. Beneath the jokes and casual conversations, Hoda's years as an investigative journalist still shined through. She knew exactly when to lighten the mood and when to ask the thoughtful question everyone else avoided. That balance made the show feel fresh every single morning. Soon, Hoda's popularity extended far beyond the television screen, because millions wanted to hear more of her story. As her audience continued growing, Hoda discovered that viewers weren't only interested in watching her, they wanted to understand the woman behind the smile. She began writing books that revealed the personal experiences shaping her outlook on life, from surviving cancer to overcoming rejection and finding hope after heartbreak. Readers connected with the same honesty that had transformed her television career, sending several of her books onto bestseller lists. Invitations poured in for speaking events, interviews, and national appearances as her influence expanded beyond NBC. She became someone people trusted during both joyful celebrations and difficult conversations. Awards followed, but the recognition that mattered most came from everyday viewers who saw parts of their own struggles reflected in her story. Hoda had become much more than a television personality. She had become a source of encouragement for millions facing challenges of their own. Yet just as everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place, an unexpected crisis at NBC would change the course of her career forever. And suddenly, the network needed her more than ever before. In late 2017, NBC faced one of the biggest controversies in its history when longtime Today co-anchor Matt Lauer left the network following serious misconduct allegations. The program suddenly found itself searching for stability at a moment when viewers were questioning everything. Executives needed someone the audience already trusted, someone who could help restore confidence without creating even more uncertainty. Hoda quickly emerged as the obvious choice. She stepped into the role on an interim basis, never assuming the position would become permanent. But viewers responded immediately. Her warmth balanced the serious news of the day, while her years as a respected journalist gave her credibility during difficult interviews. Just weeks later, NBC officially named her the permanent co-anchor alongside Savannah Guthrie, making television history as the show's first all-female anchor team. The promotion wasn't simply another career milestone, it represented years of perseverance finally paying off. Still, the new title also brought responsibilities that very few people truly understood. Because behind the smiles each morning, Hoda's workload was becoming almost impossible to sustain. From the outside, Hoda seemed to be living the dream. She co-anchored the flagship hours of Today with Savannah Guthrie before continuing straight into Today with Hoda and Jenna, spending nearly 4 hours live on television almost every weekday. But what viewers saw represented only a fraction of her day. Her alarm often rang around 3 a.m., long before most of New York had even gone to sleep. Production meetings, script reviews, makeup, rehearsals, interviews, and endless preparation filled every hour before the cameras ever started rolling. By the time the final broadcast ended, much of her energy had already been spent. She maintained the cheerful personality audiences loved, but that consistency required enormous discipline and sacrifice. Friends often described her schedule as relentless, leaving little room for rest or family life. For years, Hoda accepted that pace because she loved the work. Yet beneath the surface, the constant demands were slowly adding up. By the early 2020s, Hoda Kotb had reached a level of success that few broadcasters ever experience. She had become one of the most recognizable faces on television, collecting prestigious journalism awards, best-selling books, and industry honors that reflected decades of relentless work. But behind every trophy and standing ovation was a lifestyle that demanded more than most people realized. While viewers saw a smiling host greeting America each morning, they never saw the alarm clock ringing before 3:30 a.m. or the constant preparation required to make hours of live television look effortless. Every interview had to be researched, every breaking story understood, and every unexpected moment handled in real time. Even on weekends, her mind rarely left the newsroom. The pressure wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Being expected to project warmth and optimism every single morning, regardless of what was happening in her personal life, slowly became exhausting. She had achieved everything she'd dreamed of professionally, yet maintaining that success came at a cost that only those closest to her truly understood. Long before becoming a mother, Hoda had already faced heartbreak that reshaped her outlook on life. Her marriage ended after only a short time, and the breast cancer treatments that saved her life also made it unlikely she would ever carry a child herself. For years, she wondered whether motherhood simply wasn't part of her future. But instead of giving up on that dream, she chose a different path. In 2017, she received the phone call that would forever change her life. She had been approved to adopt a baby girl. She introduced Haley Joy to the world with tears streaming down her face, calling it the happiest moment she'd ever experienced. Just 2 years later, another miracle arrived when she adopted her second daughter, Hope Catherine. Suddenly, the woman who had spent decades chasing deadlines was learning bedtime routines, school schedules, and the quiet joy of simply being called Mom. Her priorities began shifting in ways she never expected. Career milestones still mattered, but nothing compared to watching her daughters grow. Yet even as her family expanded, another deeply personal relationship was quietly reaching its own crossroads. For nearly a decade, Hoda and financier Joel Schiffman appeared to have built the kind of relationship fans admired. They supported one another through parenthood, celebrated milestones together, and eventually became engaged, with wedding plans exciting viewers who had followed their journey from the beginning. But life has a way of changing even the strongest plans. The global pandemic delayed their ceremony more than once, giving the couple extra time to reflect on what they truly wanted. In early 2022, Hoda surprised viewers by revealing that they had decided to end their engagement. There was no dramatic scandal, no public argument, and no shocking accusations. Instead, she explained with remarkable honesty that they had realized they were better as friends and co-parents than as husband and wife. Rather than allowing disappointment to define their future, they committed themselves to raising Haley and Hope together with love and respect. It was another reminder that life's biggest decisions aren't always the easiest ones. Still, an even greater challenge was already waiting just around the corner, because one frightening phone call would soon change everything inside Hoda's home. When Hoda suddenly disappeared from Today in early 2023, viewers immediately sensed something was wrong. Days passed with little explanation, fueling concern and endless speculation online. The truth, however, was far more emotional than anyone imagined. Her youngest daughter, Hope, had been rushed to the hospital after doctors discovered a serious medical condition that required immediate attention. Later, Hoda shared that Hope had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, a lifelong condition demanding constant monitoring and daily care. Overnight, the rhythm of their family changed completely. Blood sugar checks became part of every morning and every night. Meals required careful planning, and even peaceful evenings carried the possibility of unexpected medical emergencies. Hoda later admitted there were countless sleepless nights spent watching over her daughter instead of sleeping herself. For someone already waking before dawn for live television, the emotional and physical demands became overwhelming. At that moment, success no longer felt like the most important thing in her life. And as one milestone birthday approached, she realized she could no longer ignore the question she'd been avoiding for months. Turning 60 wasn't simply another birthday for Hoda. It became the moment she stopped running on autopilot. Surrounded by family and close friends, she found herself reflecting on everything she had accomplished over nearly 3 decades at NBC. She had earned the awards, reached the top of her profession, and become one of the most beloved personalities in American television. Yet one thought kept returning. What if the next chapter of my life looked completely different? She realized that for years, every decision had revolved around production schedules, early morning alarms, and the relentless pace of live broadcasting. Meanwhile, Haley and Hope were growing older with every passing season. She began asking herself whether she wanted to spend the next decade chasing ratings or creating memories with the people who mattered most. Friends later recalled that she seemed unusually reflective during that period, as though she already knew a major decision was coming. The whispers she'd been trying to ignore had become impossible to silence. On what seemed like an ordinary morning, Hoda looked into the familiar cameras of today and delivered the words no one expected to hear. With emotion in her voice, she revealed that she would be stepping away from the show after nearly 17 years as one of its defining personalities and 26 years with NBC. The studio fell unusually quiet as her co-hosts struggled to hold back tears. For millions of viewers, it felt almost impossible to imagine the program without the woman who had become part of their daily routine. Hoda explained that turning 60 had made her realize it was time to turn the page and embrace a different chapter of life. She spoke about wanting to be more present for her daughters and no longer letting every morning begin before the rest of the world had even woken up. It was a graceful farewell, filled with gratitude rather than bitterness. But the moment the broadcast ended, another story began. Online, fans weren't satisfied with the official explanation. They wanted to know what had really happened behind the scenes. And within hours, the internet was overflowing with theories that refused to disappear. The moment Hoda announced her departure, speculation spread faster than the news itself. Some online commentators insisted NBC was quietly replacing veteran stars with younger faces to appeal to a changing audience. Others claimed there had been growing tension behind the scenes, pointing fingers at her relationship with Savannah Guthrie despite the lack of credible evidence supporting those claims. Every public appearance, every interview, and even ordinary moments between the two hosts were suddenly analyzed as though they contained hidden clues. The more people searched for drama, the more theories appeared. Yet none of the rumors ever produced concrete proof. Those who had worked closely with Hoda consistently described her as someone respected throughout the network, making the alleged feuds difficult to reconcile with reality. Still, one report continued attracting attention because it involved something far more believable than celebrity gossip. It centered on the changing economics of television itself. If there was any hidden pressure influencing Hoda's decision, many believed it wasn't personal conflict, it was financial reality. And that's when reports about her enormous salary changed the entire conversation. For decades, network morning shows generated enormous advertising revenue, allowing broadcasters to pay their biggest personalities extraordinary salaries. But the television landscape had changed dramatically. Audiences increasingly turned to streaming services, podcasts, YouTube, and social media for news and entertainment, leaving traditional networks under growing financial pressure. Reports surfaced suggesting Hoda's annual salary exceeded $20 million, making her one of the highest-paid figures in daytime television. Industry insiders claimed that any future contract would likely include a significant reduction in pay as NBC adjusted to the new reality. Neither Hoda nor NBC publicly framed her departure as a contract dispute, and no evidence suggested there had been a bitter negotiation. Instead, many observers concluded that several truths could exist at once. Caring for Hope required more time. Years of exhausting schedules had taken their toll, and the business of television simply wasn't what it had once been. When those factors collided, stepping away began to look less like a shocking decision and more like a logical one. Not long after her farewell, a brand new rumor swept across entertainment media. This time, people claimed Hoda was preparing to return to daily television by replacing Kelly Clarkson in her daytime time slot. The story spread so widely that many viewers accepted it as fact before hearing a single official statement. Hoda finally addressed the speculation herself, and her response couldn't have been clearer. She laughed off the reports, saying she had never even discussed taking over the show and urged people to stop believing everything they read online. She explained that walking away from today hadn't been about finding another demanding 5-day-a-week job. It was about creating a completely different lifestyle. Instead of another exhausting television schedule, she wanted flexibility, time with her daughters, and the freedom to pursue projects that genuinely inspired her. Podcasts, long-form interviews, wellness initiatives, and occasional NBC specials fit that vision far better than returning to another daily studio routine. For the first time in decades, Hoda was defining success on her own terms. And when you step back and look at the full picture, the real story becomes much clearer. Looking back, it's easy to understand why so many people searched for one dramatic explanation behind Hoda Kotb's departure. But real life is rarely that simple. Her decision wasn't driven by a single headline or one defining moment. It was the result of years of relentless early mornings, countless live broadcasts, changing priorities, and a family that suddenly needed more of her than ever before. Hope's diagnosis reshaped daily life in ways few outsiders could truly appreciate. Turning 60 encouraged her to ask difficult questions about how she wanted to spend the years ahead. At the same time, the television industry itself was evolving, making even legendary careers subject to new financial realities. Rather than waiting until burnout forced the choice, Hoda decided to leave while she still loved the work, and while she could walk away on her own terms. That may be the most remarkable part of her story. After decades of helping millions begin their mornings, she finally chose to reclaim her own. And perhaps that's the lesson hidden beneath all the rumors. Sometimes the bravest career move isn't climbing to the next level. It's recognizing when you've already reached the top and deciding that the people waiting for you at home matter even more.